Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 19 in the 68 Mustang Fastback conversion build known as Fangled. Now in the previous couple of videos I have worked on installing the TCI suspension. I went through some problems that I had with that and what I did to make things work. The car is currently a roller, as I demonstrated in the last video, and I'm very happy with that. There's a lot more to do beyond just making it a roller. All the suspension will be coming back off. I will have to paint things and prep things, so there's a lot more to do. One of the things I have to deal with is spacing for the Coyote engine and the 6R80 transmission. And what that will involve is modifying the transmission tunnel, hopefully not the firewall at all, but the opening for the transmission tunnel. So I could use the engine and the transmission, put them on my hoist, and work them in and out of the car multiple times to try to modify things and make sure everything fits. Or I could do something different. So what I have done is I've gone to Summit Racing and I picked up a skeleton transmission mock-up, and I need to put that together. And I ordered from Speedway Motors the Coyote skeleton engine. And so that needs to be assembled as well. So I'm going to go through that and show you that process. But there's something else I want to talk about, and this was dealing with some of the pieces and parts that came with the TCI kit and a little confusion that I had. And I have some of that cleared up. So the first thing you'll notice is I'm using the white pointer today because I don't know where to put the green one. Okay, this bushing kit that I talked about was in a package or bundle that was separate from the engine mounts, and I said maybe this is for the engine mounts. Well, that's what they're for. So it has the inner sleeve and the bushings, and that'll fit in this engine mount. In this kit that came from TCI, it has both of the engine mounts, and it had the bolts and hardware to attach everything. And I'm pretty confident these bushings were not in there. I can't say 100%, but I also can't say that I was the one that opened this box. So it may have been opened previously by the owner, I don't know, and maybe it ended up somewhere else, but nonetheless, these bushings go here. The other thing we talked about was these braided brake lines. And I mentioned that it has, one kit had straight fittings and the other one had 90-degree fittings. Now, I was sent a picture by a follower on Facebook and Instagram, Call of George, and according to the picture, these with the 90-degree elbow go to the front brake calipers, and these straight ones go to the rear calipers. And I'll post that picture so you can see, because I didn't find anything that was in the kit that defined that. So that's I'm thankful that he sent me that picture. So we'll deal with that later on. I want to show you this. So this is the kit from Summit Racing, 6R80 Trans mock-up. And in this box is a series of plates that get assembled together. And this particular setup has these flat plates, and they have slots, and they have tabs. So you see here it has an F, you know, kind of like slot A, slot B, whatever, goes together, and there you can see it says 6R80. So I will assemble all of these pieces to represent the 6R80 transmission. Over here I have this kit. Now this is two parts. One is, let's see here if you can read that. That's the short block kit for the Coyote engine. And if I remember, their instructions said Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3. So hopefully all of that is the same as the engine. I can only assume based on their instruction. The other part of that kit, I don't know if it has it on the side. Yeah, the other part of the kit is the heads. So basically you assemble these pieces with nuts and bolts, and it represents the cylinder heads. This one also has a bunch of nuts and bolts. Now the idea is you can assemble this and test fit stuff like headers or accessories, see if you have clearance for, in the transmission tunnel. So I want to get, at least, if today, I don't know yet, I'll hopefully get the engine and the heads assembled, and then we'll take a look at those as well. For this, I decided just to pull all of the pieces out of the box, lay them up on the cart, and get an idea of what's in the packaging. So the package of bolts, I opened it up, spread those out, and they gave you a lot of bolts. I mean, a lot of nuts and extra hardware. So I assume they're anticipating you'd want to attach other things to it. Pretty basic, just a few bolts in the front and in the back, and the bottom assembly only kind of goes one way. I kept looking at the instructions to verify how these pieces fit together, and then the side supports where they'll eventually hold the engine mounts. I didn't really pay too much attention to left and right, so I was just putting it together. It looks like they could go either way. I didn't see any variation to them. Later on, that comes into play when I talk about the engine mounts, and maybe I just got lucky in putting the pieces where they are and got them in the right location. I don't remember exactly, because the engine mounts only fit one way. Now, the upper plate here, same process. Just run some bolts in. There were smaller bolts that were like a 10 millimeter head, and then there were larger bolts which were, I thought they were half inch, were actually a 13 millimeter, so it's a metric setup. I dumped out the bolts for the head assemblies, and then I started separating the pieces. And I point this out later. They're identified like 1A, 1B, 3A, 3B, whatever. And I laid these pieces out and started assembling them per the instructions as well. Pretty simple to do, nothing complicated. Kind of like doing a big erector set. When we were kids, we had those erector sets, and I know I enjoyed doing those, and I could probably do stuff like this all day long if I had kits like this to build, because it's kind of fun to put this together. Now this plate, I had to flip it over a few times until I figured out that it went a certain way. This one hole there that I pointed at was an indicator of how it fit on that cylinder head. So run these bolts in. These were the smaller bolts with a 10 millimeter head, and got all those in place. And then once that was established, I came back and just ran them tight with the cordless tool there. So I set the heads up in place, got them bolted on, and I'm just following the instructions here. Like I said, that those pieces on the side, maybe I did get them, or did see something in the instructions, or maybe I just got lucky and put them in the right place. But I'll have to double check that later on, now that I'm thinking about it. But it turned out really nice, and I'm very happy with it. Okay, here's what I have as the assembly, and these are all labeled. So you see here it says 2C, this has 2A, this has 3A, and this one has 3C. So I guess this one is probably considered 1, and then this is 2, and this is 3. Makes sense when you think about it. There it is down there, 1A. Okay, now the other thing that I want to do as I go through this process is test fit like these engine mounts. So I talked about it earlier in one of the other videos that I had these bushings, and I wasn't sure if these were the correct ones, but apparently that's what they're for right there. So I'll be pressing these into these mounts, and also this has on this side 6 bolt holes that you could put, I guess, different types of mounts onto it. But this side only has 3 main ones and then 1 down here. And that doesn't correspond. Like if you look at the other side, there's 6 in an pretty much even pattern. And this has these 3, and then this one is different. So what that tells me is this is for the passenger side. So it'll only fit one way. You can't put this on the other side, it won't work. So that narrows that down pretty quick. This one, again, 3 main bolt holes that'll hold that in place. And I'm assuming there's other things that can bolt to this. I'm not going to really research that very much at this point because I don't need to. The next thing I want to do is assemble this transmission piece, and this is labeled 6R80. You can see it right there on that. And this one is different. It is not a bolt together one that I can see. It is slots and tabs. So you see there it has F, and there's an F. So it'll all interlock together. I don't know if I've seen an actual set of instructions yet. It may be that you just follow the old tab system. So I'm going to put that together, and then we'll go forward from there. What I may end up doing is bolting the mounts to this, and then seeing how well it'll sit in the car by itself, minus the transmission. Now I started off assembling the engine mounts by putting these bushings in, and they are a very tight fit. So use the mallet as I always do to drive them in and drive in the center bushing. And I know this will have to come apart later whenever I'm applying paint to this, so I have to be very cautious with it because it is such a tight fit. And I really had trouble later on with these bushings when I was trying to assemble them into the mounts that were built into the cross member. The tolerance super tight, and I had to use the mallet to get them in place. But I have to play with that maybe later on. I may have to open up those mount points on the cross member slightly just to help whenever it comes time to put the real engine in, because I'm not going to have the freedom to access it like I did, or I will, as you'll see in a future segment here. So get the engine mounted, turn this around, put the other one on. And this is what I was talking about, and I'll talk about it later in the video, about the locations of those mounts, how they only fit one way. And after doing the other side, I realized I can put a couple of bolts in there, get them in place ahead of time. And I like that you can reach through this engine, let's say, to get these bolts in place. It makes it a lot simpler. And I didn't make these tight. I kept them a little bit loose so that they can move around. Double checking the bolts that came in the kit, that those actually are the right length for the engine mounts. And they are, so I set those aside whenever I go to put this on. As I said before, I leave the core support loose so I can just move it out of the way and set that engine up in place. Now it took me a few tries until I could get it really close to even fitting. And like I said, the bushings, the plastic bushings are very tight. It took me a few tries with the mallet and trying to tap it down into place. I ended up using a screwdriver and getting it between the bushing and the flange to try to give it, an angle to set in. Using the mallet again and some screwdrivers here to kind of pull it down into place until I could get the bolt to line up. And once I did that, I was able to get the bolt started, and then I used the mallet to tap it all the way through. This will come into play later on as I talk about these bolts further down in the video. So using screwdrivers here, getting it to sit down into the proper spot. And there is some play in this. These mounts can move left and right, maybe half an inch overall. So in this case, I do have them pretty much centered on the slotted openings on the side there. So I shake out the bag and the packaging there because on this transmission kit, there were no instructions. And I'm going to go into detail about this as I go through the process. So here I am just kind of playing it by ear. How is this supposed to go together? And it can only go, I say it can go one way, but it can go two ways for sure. You can put those plates in facing one direction or another. So right there I'm demonstrating you can just turn that forward one around. Now here I'm working on trying to get this rib or spine in place, and I realized the cutting of that groove there was not complete. So there ended up being this piece of metal that should have been removed at some point. I had to use channel locks and wiggle it and get it to break loose before I could even try to get this on. So I get this taken care of, get that out of there, get rid of that, and then I go through the process of trying to piece all this together. Now, it was a learning curve because that front section, the slot goes forward rather than up and down. So it was really not helping me. I had to get it out of the way. And so I ended up pulling that out of the way and then used the mallet to drive these pieces together. The slot on the bottom there fit fine. It only goes one direction. But as I point out, as we go into deeper into the video, I'm going to talk about these plates and the variables that I saw and what I did to verify that I had them on the right way. So there is the mock-up assembled, and like I said, I think I said there was no instructions in this box, so I kind of just assumed where everything would go. Now I'm a little confused, and the reason for that is I did a video on this on Patreon, and I noticed when I stood back here, this kind of has a curve in it, and I thought, well, are these panels in the right location? The thing is, it has these little slots, and the dimension left and right is going to be the same, basically. So you could put this on either side. And then I looked at these tabs, and I have them all facing the same way. And again, I thought, is this, the right way? Because there's some variables here. You got this side is a little lower than this side, and you have this shape, which is different than this shape, and you have this ear up here. And also, this is really confusing because this opening right here, my assumption is that's for the starter. Now look at this. This is the kit that I got from Summit. And if you look right here, it shows this opening on the opposite side. It does show that tab facing aft, aft, aft. So those three are in the right spot. But as I looked at this, I'm thinking, what else could that be? Because surely that's for the starter. Well, I went to another website and I pulled up JEGS. This is the same thing from JEGS. And here they're showing it on the right side, the hole. And there's the tab, aft, aft, aft. So I'm thinking the display they have at Summit is not shown correctly. There you can see it a little bit better. And I also I looked up another one just to see. This is another mock-up. This is a totally different version, but this one has the starter on the right side. So now I'm really thinking, and it doesn't make any sense that it wouldn't be any other way, that they have this imagery or this put together backwards. Because on the engine, you don't have a starter over here. There is a hole, some sort of cover right here. And I'm sure they wouldn't represent that with the transmission when you have the starter right here on the right side. So there's the mount hole. There's another one back here. So looking at this, I'm pretty confident I put this together correctly. So now I did bend over these tabs just slightly. I took a pair of channel locks and just bent them slightly because if I want to reuse this and store it, I need to be able to take this apart. So that's why I did that. Now, the thing with all of this is the bolts that hold this together right here. Those are representing the transmission mounts. So if we look at where those are, you've got 1, 2, there's 3, here's another one down there, and compare it to these, of course, same situation. So these top ones are going to have to come out for the transmission to fit in. I think what I'm going to do is get this back up on the lift and test fit the transmission from underneath just to see, what I have. So I'm going to give you the best angle that I can. This is the cross member for the original setup. And if I take the mock-up and push it up into place, I'm making contact with that with about 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches to go before the upper bolts on the transmission will get close to those bolts up there on the engine. So there's going to have to be a cut made somewhere on either side here and elevate this up. And I'm talking with a friend of mine who has done this before, and hopefully he's going to give me some direction as to what he did. So I know he cut his floor and then he pushed this section up to make clearance, and so we'll see how that works. See if I can do this maybe from another angle, looking at it more from the front. This comes up, and again hits about there, so I don't think the width is going to be a problem. It's just going to be the height, so more than anything. So we'll see what I come up with. I think I have a plan. I've drawn some lines after looking at some pictures my friend Harry sent me of how he cut his to make this panel, this section, go upward. Now when I put the mock-up transmission in, it's rubbing right there. I put a little, went back and forth and just made sure it indicated where it was hitting. And he cut his basically right behind these ribs in this area, straight across, came down at an angle here, and then went back. Now in his images he sent me, he didn't have this cross member in place. And you know, it's not that critical to have this at this point, other than I'm going to need to come up with something to make the cross member that's going to hold the back of the transmission. This upper portion here, this is all going to go. I don't need any of that. It's not going to help anything. This is welded pretty solid right here on both sides to the floor pan. Now you can see I drew two lines. I was trying to make the lines even height-wise. So I had this line. I drew this line first, and then I drew this upper line. I was like, nope, that's too high. So I came down lower. So I think what I'm going to do is cut through all of this and come all the way back into this area. Like this whole thing's going to have to come out. I'll cut this off completely. Just get rid of it. I may do some sort of transition on these. I may cut them, bend this in, and then weld it back just to add some strength to it, because ultimately the transmission cross, or the mount point, is actually back here somewhere in this area. So I can't move this back, but I can use it as a mount point. So I may make something that attaches to this and basically joggles back and comes across and reattaches to this one. So I think that's the plan at this moment. Now I will, like I said, I'm going to cut this open, cut all this off, and cut this out, and then set the mock-up in there to see how all that's going to look. And this is, right now, this is very beneficial to have this. I should also point out, when I put it up in place and I was using these as references, the transmission is kind of fatter on the passenger side. And if you look at the tunnel, this side is actually more inboard than this side. So if you look at this distance from here to here, you can see that's about, you know, I don't know, maybe 6 inches. And if you look at it this way, you can see that's probably closer to 7 or 8. It's well past, you know, this distance. So I may look at that too. I may reconfigure this a little to give see if I need to put more space on this side. I don't know if I need to just yet. I want to get this center section cut out and then go from there. I'm so glad that I got used to using these 4.5 inch grinders. In the past, I would have used air tools to make these cuts and would have taken a lot longer. You know, when you have an electric tool, it has power. It's not going to die on you. It's going to keep on cutting. And you have to be careful with that too, because with that same approach, it could hurt you. So that's why, like, I have my face shield on, I have hearing protection on, I have my eyeglasses on to help me see, and I make these cuts and try to be careful that I'm not putting myself in danger in the process. I have had one of these discs come apart, and just be safe. Always protect yourself, because you never know when something could fly loose and cause damage. So I cut this front section loose. I wanted to make sure that I had at least that one out of the way. And I point out, I don't know if I talk about it later in the video, but I never welded this floor pan and the firewall together at that seam. I intentionally left that unwelded so that I could take this apart. Now I'm getting the car down so that I can access the interior to make the other cuts that I want to do on the tunnel. I couldn't make them all from the underside of the car. So I already had my line established based on the cut. So I knew I could just set the tool in there and follow that line. And then this back one, I really didn't have any particular location established. I just knew that I needed to cut straight across. So I started that cut on the driver's side. And then I moved over to the passenger side and finished the lower cut on the tunnel. Got that taken care of. And once I was finished with that, I moved up and did the vertical cut on the top section there so that I could get this out of the way. And that's going to give me plenty of material to work with later on whenever I make the replacement piece. I'm trying to find a good angle to show you this. So taking a mock-up and now putting it in the opening, I'm very close, like maybe another inch or so that it has to go up for that to clear. I think what I'm going to do, I may experiment a little bit, is, and again I hope the camera is aimed in the right spot, but it needs to come up more here in the center. And I could cut this all the way to this front lip here, but I don't know that I want to. What I may end up doing, and I'm just kind of talking myself through this a little bit, you know how I do this. So if I cut this in the middle, I could bend this up. I could bend this up and give me more in the center, but I don't know if that's enough to clear that front edge. The other thing is I could still cut this in the front and in the center and bow this out and this up, meaning it's got like almost like a flap that you could raise up like that on either side. And this all, I mean, it just may take some experimenting, because I don't know that I want to cut this all the way up here and out, but I may have to. I may have to, because once I get clearance here, I'm going to maybe have to reshape all this anyway. So, you know, see, and this side over here, I know you can't see it very well. This side over here, what I don't like is these ripples. And that's how they come. That's how it's stamped. And that's what's giving me some grief, because if I cut that out, I can remake that piece, but I don't know that I need to. Like I said, if I cut here and I cut here and push this and this up and create a curve, that might be the answer. It's not going to hurt me to actually try that. I could cut this, cut that, and then if it doesn't work, I'll just continue cutting and cut it all out and just get rid of it. So let me cut it and we'll take another look. I know this is an awkward angle to be looking up. So I did cut this in the middle, cut this here and here, and then I took a mallet and curved this up just a little bit. And it kind of distorts the shape, but it gives me a chance to see what I can work with. The other thing I have to consider is on this side, I don't know if it shows up very well, there's some scratches right here. There's an ear on that transmission that is hitting that spot. So if it'll show up in the camera, there's that ear right here that's sticking out, and that is represented on the transmission. And the thing is, like I said before, this side is wider than this side. So I may end up having to compensate and roll this out more to give it some clearance, because this almost fits. It almost fits. I get up there and it's hitting that corner, and that's where those scratches are. So I still may end up cutting this line, maybe cut somewhere over here yet, and roll this out just to try to give it a little more room. But I'm not going to get in a hurry. I'm going to think about this before I do it, as I always do. You'll see what I come up with. So I've made some cuts, and you can kind of see there. I cut this open in the center and also cut a line there. So I've also cut over here on this side because the corner of that mock-up piece was hitting right there. So I rolled this up slightly, and then I put it back up in place, and what I found was, even though I had bent this back, the top is still hitting. So, see if I can get the camera in a decent spot. If you look here, I drew a line, and I feel like that's what I need to do at this point, is to cut that open and allow this to bend back. Now what I could do, a couple ideas here, I could make some cuts this way, straight down, and just keep that piece of metal there, just roll it up. That might be the quickest way to make room. Instead of cutting it all the way off, keep something there that I can attach to later. So maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I'll just cut some lines in a few spots and allow that to move. So I'm taking my time. I don't want to cut too much out of the way in one shot and then regret it later. And then we'll see what I can come up with after this. So I made 4 cuts here and rolled this up. I just pushed this piece out of the way. It's not really going to make much difference at this point. I cut a little further here and a little further here, and then rolled this piece out. And I think at this point that's going to be enough to get the mock-up transmission up there. I'll set it up in place loosely, and then later on I'll come back and I'll try to bolt it up to the back of the mock-up engine. So now this fits up here and doesn't make any contact, at least at this point. I'm going to, I think, because I don't want to take all of this apart, these 2 bolts will fit inside of the hole right here. Like the bolt head will fit into that hole. So if I take out these 4 and these 2 up here, these 2 and these 2, I should be able to bolt this up on and leave this in place. This is very rigid. This, I mean, that doesn't move hardly at all. So I'll support the mock-up transmission and bolt that in, and we'll take another look at it. Now, as I was saying previously, there's 2 bolts on the bottom section there and 2 bolts on the top, and I think the intent of these pieces working together, like I don't know if Summit planned on having these bolt diameters, but they matched up top and bottom very well. And as I was pointing out, the transmission, the middle holes in the mid-height holes are bigger, and they slide over the heads for the bolts that Speedway used in this kit. So I don't know if somehow they choreographed that together or if they just knew that they needed to make that happen, but it worked out really well, because once I got these lower bolts in place and I adjusted the stand here in just a second, I raised it up so I can make it, hold this up in place. Then the side bolts that I was talking about, the larger holes, they just slipped right over the heads of those bolts. And then I was able to reach up through and get these upper bolts in place, and it worked out really well. I'm really happy with how they designed these pieces, and they seem to work well together. So kudos to them for that design. I'm going to start off with this angle here because I want to show you this. This is the mount, the rubberized mount that goes on the back of the original transmission. So I took it off and realized this is really kind of thick, but that's the way it's made. I don't know if they make different ones or not, but this is what I have to work with. So there's 3 bolts that go here, and they are represented on this transmission. The bolts that were in this, that were in the transmission, were too big to go through the holes in this plate. So I just grabbed some smaller bolts and put them in there. Now, what's going to be a challenge is making this work with the existing cross member. So we all know that, you know, the cross member would come underneath the transmission, and this cross member is now well ahead of this location. So what I'm thinking of doing, and I did this before on the other Brooklyn Pony, I created my own transmission carrier or mount. On this side over here, there is an existing hole that's about 6 1/8 inches from the floor support. And if I use that hole, let me just angle this back just a little so you can see a little better. So there's that hole here, 6 1/8. Now that hole isn't represented accurately on this side because it's actually inboard towards the center more because of this offset in distance. So this is, you know, like 8 inches, and this side over here is like 10, let's just say. I don't know what the numbers are. But the hole that is on the passenger side is a lot more inboard. So what I have drawn here, this is the original hole. This is where I would put a hole using the same location that's on that side. So 6 and about 1/8, and then I come over about 3 inches and I would put a second hole. And if I do this, I will put a piece of pipe inside of this so that this can't collapse. So you cut the hole a little big, put the pipe in, weld it, now you've got a rigid structure. So that would give me a mount point on both sides. And then consider this distance from here to the center of this bolt, roughly, is about 3.5 inches. So I have to create something to come back and connect this. So just using a simple piece of wire, I can demonstrate that I can do something along these lines to where I could take some square tubing and some plates and make a C-channel, is what I would prefer to do, so that this is biting on both sides. If I do it on this side, it'll work. I mean, I could just put a plate here, but I like having more structure. So I would prefer to do a width, you know, full width. But if I create a plate, I can bring it down further than that edge. I can make it longer. And then I can adjust my angles so that this is not straight up and down. It would be at an angle like this and come back and then across into this. Now this centerpiece, I don't know what the original cross member looked like. Assuming, you know, some sort of angle and a angle down, angle in a flat plate, something along those lines. So I could easily make a plate that would run the width of this so that these bolts come down through, and then as I'm demonstrating with this again with the wire, I can make something that angles downward from that corner across and then back up. So these are some of the things I just have to consider when I'm going through this process. And I don't know if somebody makes a cross member. I doubt it. I have not seen anything like that. And it would be kind of specific for, you know, this kind of application. So I can fabricate something to do that. I don't see that as being a problem. Now I'm going to show you the headers, and we're going to see how those are going to look in relation to the rest of this. We'll have to go up through like this. And it looks like, for the most part, it will bolt onto the block. Like, I don't see any angle issue with how it's meeting the surface of the block. But now you can see, if I put this close as I'm going to get it without actually bolting it on. The exhaust is running right here as well. You know, so I've got to create a transmission mount, and I may have to revise this because I need to be able to get this pipe under here. And that transmission mount is going to be possibly in the way. So, pipe, yeah, I may end up having to do something where I come across the top and come down so I can create a cavity in this area for the exhaust to go through. Okay, what I want to do is I'm going to mount both of the headers as best I can, and then take another look at this so I can step behind it and look at it a little differently. Well, I have the headers on, and they bolted up nicely to the simulated cylinder heads. So no issue with that. And it looks like they run pretty close but clear the transmission where the pan would be on the bottom here. So you can see that. Now, I don't know who makes these headers. I was told these were a bonus with the TCI kit. So TCI provided these. That's all I know about those. I don't see any markings to know who makes them or anything like that. But it looks like, at least at this point, we've got clearance going all the way up. So that is a good thing. It's a little close here on the sides. Now there's still some play. This isn't fully, you know, super tight. And there's no gasket. You know, it's just a close mock-up. However, I have some concerns as I do this. So we have a MagnaFlow exhaust system, and I've talked about this before. And this has the crossover pipe. It has two of these straight pieces. It has two of these angled pieces. There's one on top of the other there, and two of these angled pieces. Now, I don't know exactly what these are meant to go to as far as connecting to a header or something like that. These clamps are designed to go around every joint and just tighten up. And it's a nice clamp, nice setup there. Have the mount brackets and some hanger bushings to support it. So I like the system of the exhaust. The problems we're running into, or I'm going to run into, is where does it go? So I have set this pipe up against the header. And I don't know exactly what's supposed to go on this. I'm assuming there's a mating flange, you know, an outlet or collector. There was nothing in the packaging. So like these headers were in their own bag, and I didn't see anything representing a collector. So I don't know if it was supposed to come with them or not. I don't know. It might be in one of the other boxes. I don't know. But it would appear to me that you're supposed to have another mating flange here, and a clamp would go around that, squeeze it all together and hold it tight, something along those lines. So what I've done is I've taken the MagnaFlow, just one of the straight pipes, and put it around that little flange sticking out, and then I strapped it here to the TCI crossover piece on the spider. Now that is up against that. In the instructions, I'm pretty sure it points out, and I'll show you the picture here too, of the exhaust system. So it shows these inlet pipes, the clamps, there's the crossover muffler over the differential, and then these different tailpipe options, I guess. So I think it says here they want a 1/2 inch of clearance somewhere in here. Yeah, 1/2 inch clearance around these pipes. So right now, if you look underneath it, I mean, it's not bad. If you're looking straight back, it's not too bad. From the side, I know it's kind of hard to get in here with the lift in the way. You can see how that is down. Get over here a little better. So the difficulty, of course, is where does it go? Because as I mentioned earlier, really can't go up and over, behind, through the tunnel. I don't see that as an option. I mean, you might be able to get somebody to bend. This is 3-inch pipe, so it would have to be bent up and back to get into that tunnel. But I don't know if that's going to work. So I tried to set the crossover pipe in place. I tried different ends to see what, how they might interact with the headers, but that didn't work. You can see it actually draws in towards the center. They don't like square up with the header. This one's angled and that one's angled. So I'm not sure exactly what the next step will be with that. But this also highlights the issue with the transmission mount. As I was saying earlier, I could have come straight back and across. I don't know if I can do that now. Like, I might have to just get a little more creative with something. I can't attach to these. I guess I technically could, but whenever you take this, let me think about that. I could drill through these U-channels and just make a big bolt go all the way through. I could do that. That might actually be the simpler option instead of trying to come off of this, because this is going to be here and not be removed unless everything's coming apart anyway. So maybe that'll be an option. I could create another plate, something like this, maybe put 2 bolts in it. I don't know yet, but that might be the option to allow this to work, because I'm going to have to come over top of this pipe one way or another and then drop down and then go back up around this side. So just some things I'm going to look at, but that may be the simpler option. Just use what's here, forget about this entirely. Yeah, it's not going to matter. I thought maybe I could just remove that tunnel completely to help with this exhaust pipe, and that, yeah, I don't see it happening, because even at that, I could not get this to curve up quick enough to go into that tunnel. At least I don't think so. So this is part of the process. When I say, about test fitting and trying to determine what can work and what doesn't, I think I've resolved some of this, because that will not be the answer. It'll be coming off of this. I want to show you something else. This exhaust pipe over here that came with the Falcon project, that is an oval exhaust pipe, and maybe that's something to consider moving forward. But I'll put that kind of up in place and just take a look at it. I know when I demonstrate this, there won't be any mufflers or anything on it, but I just want to show you how this may be appealing. Hey, look, I'm being safe. I can't tell you how many times I've bumped my head on sharp stuff under here. Get you one of the safety helmets. Trust me. Okay. This pipe, this oval pipe, if we were to come straight off of the header, which we're not going to be able to do, but that might help. I don't know. Yeah, I know it gives it a little more clearance, kind of hard to see from that angle. Let me back up a little so you can see it a little differently. Trust me. Okay. And I'm just showing you this because it's here. It's probably not going to happen. But this will end up being what I use on the Falcon later on. I'm going to have this coming out the side like that somehow. But it's a challenge when you're trying to work all these pieces and parts together. I'm going to put that X crossover pipe up there as well so you can see. And I know it's really hard to tell from this distance. I can't get much lower and get under more, but let me show you. demonstrate. If I were to come off of that one pipe, this would have to go somewhere in there. Now, it could be shortened up. It could come forward a little bit. My concern here is we've got the travel of this arm, which isn't going to move much at all. This is probably the lowest it'll ever be, but it doesn't go around. This doesn't go around that. So I don't know. There will be some troubleshooting moving forward to try to figure this out. But I'm not too worried about the exhaust right now. My concern is more about getting the transmission mount fabricated and verifying the size of the tunnel. And then I will look forward to creating the actual tunnel, the top, piece. I'm not going to do that now though. I want to make sure that I have enough clearance so that when I do test fit the engine, that it'll fit in, and then I can get more serious about clearances and stuff like that. This gives me a head start on all of that. So here's where I'm at in the thought process. I was looking at building something and coming off of this cross member, or coming off of the sides here. And I did a little research and I found a product that's available. I ordered it off of Jegs. And basically it has a bracket that you attach in this location. It goes up and then comes back underneath this mount point on the transmission, and then goes up again and then comes back over to this one. The nice part about it is it eliminates that big aluminum chunk of a transmission mount that was here, and it creates, there's a plate, I'll post a picture of it. It adds a plate, and then that plate has a mount point with an ear on it, and then a secondary kind of carrier. So I'll show you, I'll post a picture of it so you understand. Now that's going to eliminate some of these issues. The other thing I wish I would have thought about, or wish I would have realized in that process, was this cross member isn't going to do anything. Now obviously I've cut it out already, but we're not gaining anything by having this here, unless there was something we wanted to mount to this thing. Maybe that'll come into play, but I am going to consider removing this completely. There's nothing to gain there. Now this does support the floor, and it's meant to support the transmission, but really it won't help us at all. And with that in mind, I almost wish that I would have realized that or known this prior, because I would not have cut the ends off of these plates. It doesn't hurt anything, it doesn't change what they do, but I would not have had to cut that. I could have eliminated this whole piece and let that ride up front and been done with it. So it's just a few things to consider. Now, what I've also looked at, and I've had people comment about, is clearance for the oil pan. And there's a lot of room here, like from the top of this bar to the bottom of this flange, let's say, that represents the block. And what I ended up doing was, I like templates, and so I created a template. I took a piece of, I did some measuring, and I took measurements from basically this mating flange for the transmission to various points coming forward, and then I put blocks of wood. You can see there's blocks of wood underneath the oil pan, and they are touching the oil pan. So that represents how much drop I have from the engine block to that location. So I basically drew this out, took some measurements, repeated those measurements, and this is what I've come up with. So I do have a cardboard template, and I'm going to put that up in place, and we'll take a look at what clearances there are. I should also point out that I went overboard. Like, this is not exact. This cutout down here is actually bigger. I'll get that out of the way. bigger than what's there. So there is a hump. When it comes back, it has like this center little hump piece in the middle that I have to be, careful about. But you can see that I made the cardboard actually slightly bigger than the oil pan itself. So I'll put that up in place, take another look at that. So with this up here and all the way back against the transmission plate, there's still clearance. Now this again is a little bigger than what I intended it to be. And I measured from side to side on the pan, and it's about 8 inches roughly from where this opening is. So I think TCI did a good job with figuring this out. And right now I don't have any real concerns with this pan. If I slide this to the other side and put it on the same basic plane of the mating flange, see if I could angle this a little bit. So looking at this angle, if I line that up, because the drop from the outer face is about 7/8 of an inch to where the pan drops down. So looking at the edge of the block and coming inboard. So if I line this up in that same location, I've got clearance. And also in the front, there's clearance for the rack and pinion. So like I said, I feel like they did a pretty good job with this. Let me grab a tape measure. And even if I go to the 8-inch limit here, it's inside of this cutout. So I don't think this is going to be an issue at all. On the other car that I did, the Brooklyn Pony, I ended up having to modify this to kind of what this design is, and now TCI has basically done that. They've addressed that issue. So I feel like the pan is not going to be a big concern with this. I'm going to put the camera to the front. So again, here's the clearance that I'm seeing with the cutout that I did, and this is bigger than what the pan will be, but it still clears the rack and pinion. There's a gap there, and even the plumbing line as it runs across doesn't seem to want to interfere at all with that. I can get a finger underneath that. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's going to be good. Now I have a few other details that I want to point out with using this mock-up engine. Whenever I was assembling it, these things are designed, the holes are pre-cut. Like the bolts are pretty snug. You can see where this bolt's holding the simulated cylinder head on top, and the holes are pretty tight. So it all fits nice. However, if I can show you right here, there's a bit of a flange, or this corner sticking out, where the head or the top piece and this come together. And what that ended up having was the header is touching on that corner right there. And it's also doing it further back. Might be able to see it a little easier right here. So it's hitting that corner for whatever reason. And I don't know why they did that. I don't know if there's some intention to it. Normally you think they design something with an intent in mind, but trying to assemble the headers on, this was fighting me a little bit. Also, this bolt right here. Now this is the engine mount, and if I put it in from front to back, then it's going to stick out further than the header. So right now, and this isn't actually fully bolted in place, like this has a little play left in it, and it may vary somewhat with the real engine, but you had to put the bolt in moving from front to back. And I did the same thing on this side without even checking it. I just did it, but there's more clearance here. Also, this set of headers has bungs on it for I guess O2 sensors. So there's one here that kind of aims towards the block, and then there's one back here which is out in the open. And then this one is a little more difficult because it's kind of closer to this frame rail. And then there's another one up here aiming to the back. Now I don't know if we're going to need to use those or not, but things are close. Like you can see there's a little bit of a gap with the frame rail and the header here. The driver's side, there's plenty of room. Like there's nothing that I see interfering with any of this. So what I need to figure out moving forward is how or what connects to these headers, because as far as I know, I don't have anything that is in the kit, because these headers were wrapped up in individual bags, and unless there's something else that's somewhere, I'm not sure what goes on here. I assume, again, there's got to be something that goes up against this and then clamps around it, but I have to figure that out. The crossmember piece is ordered and on its way, so I'll be addressing that later on. But there's really not much else that I can do at this point. I've talked about the idea of the tunnel, and I cut it out intentionally long just because I wanted to have more room to adjust. So this is a pretty good size opening here, and in conversations I had with my friend, that's what he did, simply because it made it easier overall. It's not going to matter much when it comes down to it. It's just some extra welds. Now the front section, or the upper portion of this, I will address later on when I actually test fit the engine and transmission, because I don't want to build anything specifically to this. This is meant just as a rough guide for me to get things in place and try to calculate things out. So this has been very beneficial, getting this transmission up in place. So that's probably about as far as I'm going to be able to get on this part of the process. So I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but I did get accomplished what I needed to, and that is mocking things in place to see what kind of room and clearances I'm going to have. Now obviously there's a lot more to do. I have that crossmember on order, and I know that I could fabricate one, but the amount of time that it would take me to make something similar to that doesn't make it cost effective. I can buy that one, know that it will at least bolt into place and take care of the need that we're going to have. I know, like I said, I know I could fabricate one. I've done that stuff before, but it's just more cost effective to buy one. And I can clamp that one in place versus bolting it right now. So if I drilled holes and mounted it and then put the real engine and transmission in and it didn't fit right, I'm backtracking. So that's why I'm not going to do that. I want to make sure I use the real engine and transmission before I drill those holes. Otherwise, I think things are coming along pretty nice. Now, this little cap right here, I guess the company says JSP. If you've ever been under one of these type of vehicles and bumped your head off of anything there, let me tell you, it hurts. And I've got plenty of little bumps and scars on my head from doing such things. And so I've had this laying around for a while, and I decided, you know what, I've got to start wearing this because I get very angry when I smack my head off of something sharp or pointy underneath there. So keep these sorts of things in mind. You know, obviously wearing safety protection goggles or the grinding shield and the earmuffs, all that comes into play, but save your head and save some frustration. So anyway, that'll be it for this video. I want to thank my patrons for being here and keeping up with me and helping me to continue to make these videos. But I also thank you for being here and being part of this. If you're interested in any of the products that I use or demonstrate, there will be links in the description box down below. And if you want to become a patron, I would appreciate it. There's also a link for that down below in the description box. Otherwise, that'll be it for this video. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.